Chapter 3. A Grim Prognosis. They were allowed to remain outside the room and it was nearly noon before mayhem in Uncle Mike's room quieted. More cops had shown up, some on duty but most off. Hospital and Odium security had wisely overlooked the minor violation of hospital policy. After all this time had passed with no word on his condition, morale was low and the expected prognosis seemed grim. A young doctor walked over to the group that were drinking stale coffee and taking turns wearing holes in the linoleum. "Are you the patient's family?" There was a general consensus of agreement. The young man seemed skeptical but was unwilling to argue the point with the more than 20 burly men, most in uniform, who already looked less than happy. HIPAA be damned. He said Mr. O'Brien had a cardiac episode and his heart stopped. His wounds are significant. We managed to stabilize him for the time being, the next 48 hours are crucial. He is now in and need at least 6 more surgeries to repair all the damage. There is a foreign substance in his wounds and it seems to be causing a toxic reaction. Our other fear is that it will inhibit his body's natural ability to heal. We cleaned the wounds, surgically removed, and even tried cauterization to neutralize this substance. We got all of it that we could see. There is a good chance that it is already in his bloodstream. It is up to him right now if he is a fighter. He has a chance. The doctor seemed eager to get away, only Ayse grabbed him by the arm and brought him over to the side. Falco was still in on the huddle of uniforms but he tried to listen to what she was saying to the doctor. She flashed an identification card at him and he nodded. Then she said Odium has received approval to start testing a new protocol for severe battlefield wounds and the Mr. O'Brien would be a perfect candidate for it. The doctor nodded, saying it sounded like a perfect approach, excluding the patient's age. His age alone would exclude him from most clinical trials. We would need to get his family consent before we could even consider such a protocol. Ayse waved away his concerns, saying the standard employment agreement included such medical testing for all employees who did not choose sign a statement that specifically waived it. The doctor looked more than a little disturbed by this fact and he said so. I would never expose myself to such an agreement. Ayse sighed and asked, did you waive it in your employment contract with Memorial Hospital? The doctor's shock turned to abhorrence. She finished by stating that Memorial was owned by a subsidiary of the Odium Group. She took out her phone and said to the doctor that she would have copies mailed over right now and the first stage of the protocol would be sent over immediately. There was a very brief conversation, then she nodded to the doctor. All you need to do is put it on his treatment chart. The doctor made a feeble objection about the consent form. She just said check your email. He took out his phone and shook his head in disbelief and muttered something about talking to Human Resources today. Ayse smiled and said, did you ever think about what the name Human Resources really means? The man seemed to go a little pale as she walked away and back to Falco. She recognized, said hello to some, waved at other and gave a few short hugs. They were a kind of family to her for a brief while and she missed it. Most of them were loud, boisterous, macho, oversized children in her opinion. Since she had dated Falco she had never received another ticket. But it made her feel safer to know that they still greeted her warmly by name. The group shrank after the doctor made his statement and it was clear that Ayse's intercession was also reassuring to Uncle Mike's extended family. A smallish man with lieutenant bars on the collar of his uniform came walking in, followed by patrolmen. Many of the on-duty officers seemed to fade into the background with his arrival. There was a hesitation when the smaller in his pristine uniform saw Falco. Everyone heard him try to order the group of veteran officers to remove Falco immediately from the facility. They nearly laughed it off with, sorry Lieutenant, I am not on duty and I can see no legal reason to do so, sir. Please write that order as a memo to my captain and 1 or 3 officers saying you're a cop, why don't you do it? Lieutenant Delgado had more than 15 years on the job and less than a year on the street. That is what you get when your brother is a city councilman. He then ordered the 2 rookie that escorted him to through Falco from the hospital, but they suddenly seemed surrounded by a blue wall on all sides. Falco walked right up to the lieutenant and put his hands gently on the other man's collar and acted like he was straightening them. Then he brushed some invisible lint from his collar. Falco leaned in close and said, we will be talking soon. Not now but soon. Then in a deep hiss he whispered into the man's ear, de vuelta en tu agujero, ratón de la casa. The rough translation of Falco broken Spanish could have been get back in your hole. House mouse. The last part being a nearly derogatory term for a police officer who didn't work the streets. Always assumed that they worked in the office out of fear. Calling a real cop a house mouse was the same as calling him cowardly worthless brown stain on the blue. Every police officer must be willing to risk his own life to protect others. There is no way you can do that writing memos and filing forms at the station. He stood up straight and tried to look the other man in the eyes, but the smaller man was intently examining the floor. Falco walked away saying a few goodbyes and walked over to Ayse. He said, "Can you stay here and look out for Uncle Mike? I want to chase down a few leads." She nodded, taking his hand for a moment. She had no problem feel his tension like an overwound spring that was about to burst. Then he turned and started to walk away. The lieutenant started to signal to the officer to follow him out. Falco just walked over to him and said, "Don't." From the angry looks from the other officers that were surrounding him, he reconsidered and kept his driver/personal security detail close to him. Falco made a stay cool gesture with his hands as he walked away. The tension seemed to alleviate a little but still was palpable.